Okay, so blessed love, and we give thanks, in a celebration time and the remembrance of our ancestors, in a special day like today, that we are um, honoring our people and other people that been in this life, preserving our nation and this connection that we have with our ancestors. So I wanted just to start like that before, just to be on time to start our meeting today. Um, let's first start with some words of His Imperial Majesty, and I quote, "History teaches us that unity is a strength and cautions us to submerge and overcome our differences in the quest for common goals, to strive with all combined strength for the path of true African brotherhood and unity." Words of His Imperial Emperor Haile Selassie I, the First of Ethiopia, excerpt from his inaugural speech to the OAU in May 25, 1963. Greetings, give thanks, more powers and love, health and strength, guidance and protection, blessed love from Rastafari. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here, sharing this time with these panelists and one and all, here in heart of celebration for the remembrance of our Emancipation Day and recalling our ancestors that built the Panama Canal. Reparations is a must. A reasoning of current state of reparations initiative and its nexus with cultural and socioeconomic drivers within the Rastafari community. Hosted by Rastafari Diaspora Alliance, Jamaica, and Panama and USA, we share a unique cultural relationship within their African descendant population that emerged out of the migrating laborers required and plantation of the United Fruit Company, construction of the Panama Railway, as well as the failed construction of the French Canal, and specifically the construction of the US Panama Canal. The Afro-descendants community in Panama moved with a unique history of facing exclusion from the country. The gold and the silver role segregated our people experiencing imposed and legal to downgrade our citizens in the US in the canal zone territory. Yes, so this way I want to start and introduce our invocation of our spirit of our ancestors. We have to give thanks every time because this is the time when we unite and defend ourselves in these times of struggling for our people. I was going to introduce Queen Mother Iphigenia, and then I have been priestess.
Greeting.
Yes, sir.
Queen Mother Iphigenia, to give her a few. You just walked in the door.
Okay.
Give her a few seconds. Less than a minute, and she'll be ready.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it, Asila. In the meantime, I'm going to make a roll call of our speakers. Dr. Ras Wayne Rose of IDOR on Rastafari Reparation and Repatriation. Empress Maxine of EADUMC on IP and the cannabis industry of Rastafari Ganja Reparation, intersecting with African Diaspora Reparation. Empress Modest I of ARP on Rastafari and Afro-Panamanian Reparations and Networking, NCOBRA and NAARC-CRC and UN African Descendants Mandate. Ras Aziz of the NCRU on Rastafari Project Development. Dr. B of DARC Foundation on Health and Wellness and Conflict Resolution within the Rastafari Nation and their impact on the Diaspora Reparations. Give thanks to all the panelists for joining this session today. We give thanks for your time and the wisdom and knowledge that we will spread today. Yes, I.
Hold on, here she comes.
Yeah, give thanks.
Greetings.
Greetings.
Greetings, greetings, Queen Mother. Give thanks.
Love Rastafari.
Selassie.
Majesty, love. Give thanks for the coming together once more today and always really require I and I coming together and looking at and chanting the path for future generation to come, you know. And I think I'm gonna take 5 minutes. I'm walking from a distance and I just came inside, so I'm well walking into my head, yeah? Yes, I give thanks. Philistine Tyre with Ethiopia, this I was born there, and the highest himself shall establish her. There I shall count, and there I write up the singers and players of instrument, and all I and I springs are within the goodness and glory and majesty of Africanness, and particularly the womb of Ethiopia. As I and I tread into the continuing of the, as I said earlier, the charting of I and I future, and I chant together the understanding of the concept of unity, that I and I do so in wise mind, knowledge and understanding, that I and I can sankofa in restoring the glory of I and I Africanness. And the premise, again, of the Majesty's word, unity is the accepted goal. Let the word of I and I mouth and the meditation of I and I heart be acceptable humbly, be acceptable within the sight of iration and within the understanding of each and every one of I and I who's seated here. These I and I acts of the Most High, Haile Selassie the First, in guiding I and I as I and I continue the journey of I and I family's legacy. Sila. Love Rastafari, I give thanks.
Rastafari.
Haile Selassie. Blessed love.
Give thanks for the much powers. Give thanks, Queen Mother, Ifia, for restoring our soul. Always proclaiming Rastafari unity and love. It's time to introduce our moderator of the day, Secretary of the ARP, Alianza Rastafari of Panama, Sankofa. Give thanks, beloved. Gotta take out the mic.
Greetings to all the panelists of our people. We are always being inspired by different things in our environment, and there's an energy that flows through. So without prolonging, I will say that it's a pleasure and it's an honor. And I will say that our race is tested to produce the finest at every moment. In their midst, there's always an expectation for our people to represent and to be represented. And I don't think for a second that it will be an exception. I am pleased to be in the midst of such a fine group of achieved and well-committed people in order to bring forth the fulfillment of what our flyers stand for. There is a very important part in our life. And this is where I mentioned, and it's not a matter of when it was first or when it was last, but I know that they paved the way. And when I use, and I mention the name of His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie I, the community replied, Ja Rastafari. And it's an energy that moves through the air. When I mention Marcus Messiah Garvey, our king, our prince, our brother, our father, our uncle, there's another greater energy that moves around the air. There's no words to describe what is felt to speak as such great pioneers in our midst. Now today, thanks to the collaboration and many others, we are here today. I also thought of John Lewis that just passed away, which he still is within our midst. Because maybe I was not born in his time, but I was born before his time, and I will be here before our time, because it's part of us. And as it was said best by one of the presidents of the United States, he was a disciple. And he took the fight across the bridge. He didn't stand on one side and just let it happen. He continued, and that's what we have to cross. It was said best by Bob Marley. I see the smile, the beautiful smile in your faces, and that's just joy, because we recognize, I and I had the opportunity to stand on the grounds of a place they call Freedom Park. It's in Birmingham, Alabama. And as I stood in that area, I only could think of my brothers and sisters that were here, that were there, that are here. And to hear the word reparation, there's such a word to quantify, and it's of much importance. So I'm going to leave you all with these words in good spirit and in good faith, so that we can move forward, and may the Almighty guide us to understand and comprehend the importance of what it means to be part and to fulfill what reparation is for our people. The panelists that I'm about to mention in that same order will have time to present their position. And then it will be a moment towards the end where we will have questions and answers alike. I will try to do my best. I'm among giants, and I know you all will direct me as I will listen. And we will have first Dr. Wayne Rose, Empress Maxine, Empress Modeste I, Ras Aziz, and as I was instructed by my elder, Dr. B. And this is the lineup that we will have having our presentation in this evening. I know you all brothers, once I introduce each one of y'all guys, I will read your small bio before I bring you on. I know you all are very well achieved, and sometimes, just sometimes, really and truly, not all the time, we have to say it. We have to let people know that we are very accomplished and it's due. So without further ado, I will pass you on to our presenter, and then I will go ahead and start the exposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sankofa, for the word, song, and powers. After we hear the words of our moderator, we're going to initiate the panel for the role of Rastafari NGOs, non-governmental organizations in civil society, reparations, negotiations, and multilateral advocacy representations. Now, the moderator will give the introduction and the biography of the speakers whenever they're going to start making their introduction. Thank you very much. Moderator Sankofa, give thanks.
Give thanks, give thanks. Well, we first have Dr. Wayne. Dr. Wayne Rose, a native of Kingston, Jamaica, and Baltimore, Maryland. He holds a PhD in African diaspora history, with additional specialization in African American and early American history. From Morgan State University, he also holds an undergraduate degree in African Studies and Master of Art History from the University of Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland. His dissertation is titled, Your Majesty, Obedience Servant, a case study of W.E. Du Bois in Pan-Africanism within the context of Ethiopianism. And without further ado, I'll leave you with Dr. Wayne A. Rose.
I Celeste the first, blessings and love to the family. And it's really Ras Wayne for the family, because this is how the family roll. We roll with our princely, kingly, and queenly titles, embraced by I of free will. So I was kind of anticipating that our beloved sister queen, Maxine, was going ahead of me based on how the thing was initially set. But a child shall lead them, and I'm a child among all these giants. So thank you for the opportunity to be initiating this reasoning. So I was asked to present on reparations and the repatriation initiatives that are being worked on right now within the structure of the organization that I chair, which is the Universal Development of Rastafari Inc. And I take great pride and, you know, a serious sense of duty when we look at the issues of reparations, which ultimately I believe leads to repatriation. And I started to do a little write-up. I've not been able to get it shared on the screen. I was trying to get it screen shared, but it's no problem. I will read from it in brief, and then we kind of expand on it a little bit. So first, it's greetings and blessings in the divine personage of Kadamawe Haile Selassie I and Empress Menin Asfa. On this 182nd anniversary of the emancipation of enslaved Africans in the British Isles and the so-called New World, the reality of cultural reclamation, repairs to the breaches of African family, which is reconciliation between and among our multiple structures, family structures, husband, wives, children, etc. And the socioeconomic justice, true emancipation, they all remain a slow and at times retractable trajectory. They're on a slow and at times retractable trajectory. And I have inadvertently become boxed in and shelved in regional, national, and social identities that are mostly antithetical to INI aspirations for repatriation and reparations. And I have not addressed and seem unwilling at times to face the challenges of social reparations. And I must do so in order to equally fulfill the circle of African repatriation. And I have perhaps by necessity embraced some of the impositions on the African liberation component of INI struggle. And I assert that those impositions are the real culprits of INI current dilemma. And here what are the things that I believe are important to be addressed in reparations. First, it's the repairing of the breaches within our individual families. I say that again. Repairing the breaches in INI individual families. Many times when we start a conversation about reparations, most of us immediately go to this notion of dollars and cents, yes? But what is reparation? What is the idea of reparation? It is the repair of something that has been breached or something that has been damaged. And I assert to the African family and the Rastafari family in particular, that I have breaches in the structures of our family, which is the first and singular most detrimental component of the demise of African people. It's the structure of families. On the slave blocks, our families were decimated, destroyed, sold to different regions and all over the place. And that is the first increment. The second increment is when we were placed in these jungles and concrete spaces in the West. In order just to survive, we had to keep moving around, and man had to be, his labor was sold all over the place. Women, their labor was sold all over the places. And by virtue of that, multiple families emerge, and the pattern of developing multiple families, we become so socialized in it that we have children, some children no longer know their fathers or mothers and can interact with them on the levels that allow for unity of IRIT, for the strengthening of the DNA that is I and I. The cultural and social pass forward of our original selves, we're not able to do that and manage that properly because we're preparing the family. And I, for one, I can speak unapologetically also that I have multiple families. But by virtue of His and Her Majesty's knowledge of His and Her Majesty's life example, I have, over the past 20 years, worked diligently in trying to ensure that I keep those children together, have them socialized to what I and I is about, what Rastafari is about, what family is about, what Africa is about. What is our responsibility in the repairing of the breach of the African family? That is the first increment I assert in the reparations agenda. Secondly is the repairing of the breach within the cultural ethos of African peoples. I have become so comfortable, and again I say by virtue of the inadvertency of our social realities, where we're boxed in different spaces, Jamaica, Panama, Brazil, wherever. We're in these different spaces and we claim and cling to these national identities. And within the national identities, we have other subgroups. And we love and claim these things, but it doesn't bode well for a oneness agenda. It doesn't bring us together because we get grieved by these different positions. I'm Jamaican, I'm this, I'm that. And therefore, culturally, we gravitate to what we develop in the process of our enslavement as a people.
Okay.
We have developed certain ways of conducting ourselves and behaving, and certain patterns within those societies. We have gravitated to those patterns and we now own them and present them to ourselves and the world as the natural self. But we also came from something. We come from a long line of history that we must reattach, reacquaint, and repair the breach for. And this is why our reparation and repatriation agendas are interlinked, because it is when we fully repair some of those breaches, that is the only time that we are really prepared for repatriation, because we cannot take the baggage, the vestiges of Western socialization into the continent of Africa without a purification and a detoxification process and believe that we're going to survive Africa. Many of us have to run away from it because those things are not needed in Africa. We have a responsibility, therefore, to repair the breach in our cultural, the lack of our cultural orientation, cultural knowledge, and cultural education. Which leads me to 3, repairing the breaches of our educational knowledge systems, which is caused by colonial miseducation, the one and the same as I just made mention of. So, we have seen the book called The Miseducation of the Negro. We see people putting out, albums. Sister Lauryn Hill did one, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, but it's a miseducation of all of I&I people, because we've come within a structure. We're taught economics and accounting and science and math and all these things from a Eurocentric perspective, some of which the applications of some of these things may be useful for the day-to-day management of our economics, etc. But they don't bode well when we start talking about the historical communal spaces that African people are from. The notion of greed above anything else, the notion of running after the almighty dollar above most things, those things are within the Western construct. And unless we detach ourselves as best as we can from some of these things and reorientate ourselves toward what is true within our culture, and this is a process, it has to be a process, then we're ill prepared for repatriation. And I'll tell you, having lived on the continent for a brief time, having visited it multiple times, can't come as Zion with the bad life from the West. It just don't work. And therefore, as we talk about, and I've not even touched on the reparation agenda that is being marshaled by so many great minds of African people. Some of it might be stated, you know, but it's a course, it's our course, it's I&I course. I&I people are trying to examine and you know, cipher through some of these things. And so I&I allow those who are focused on the economic component of reparations, the paying from the West to our people for the injustices of 400 years of slavery. That's in another kettle that many of us don't have any dealings with or complete knowledge of, and won't even have the time to do those things. The people who specialize in that, I leave them to do that work, and I pray for them for their success. But the things that are touchable for I&I as Rastafari are the repairing of the breaches in I&I livity, the repairing of the breaches in our families, our communities, and to ensure that I&I become members of a new race, a new ethos, a new activity, a new brain wave that takes us within the clarity of a 2020 moving forward, the vision of a 2020 moving forward, that takes us away from the miseducation, the missocialization, and the inadvertent attributes that comes with all of those things, where we find ourselves at the bottom. I&I, the royal African Ethiopian family, find I&I self at the bottom of the social ladders in the West and in the East and all over the world. And we're looking at ourselves saying, but I know I'm better than this. When did we get here? We cannot. I'll assert this over and over to the family, and I will not achieve those great ideas that I&I have until I&I repair those breaches. And the most essential component of repairing that breach is not left up to chance. The most essential component of repairing that breach is a black print given to I&I by I&I Divine Majesty, Kadamawi Haile Selassie I and Empress Meninaswa. They have given it. They don't just make somebody write something. They lived it, documented it, and shared it in visual forms on black and white print, and instructed us, intentionally instructed us to organize ourselves, to centralize our thinking, not just our resources, but our thinking and ways of activity, and to I&I come together as I&I is doing now, and with great pleasure also, to come and speak with the family to say, listen, don't stress ourselves about all the things I&I cannot control. Here's one thing I&I can control. That sister that I did bad in the 1990s, because I was of the Solomonic mindset and beliefs, I want to have 7 wives and these things. I still sometimes think. But that mindset that allowed her to be disrespectful of her humanity, I had to go forward. I had to go find some of them and say, sister love, even if they don't want to talk to me, accept this apology because I was wrong. That mindset that allowed I&I to look at a youth, my own seed, and speak to him in ways that make him feel that I cannot reconcile with him or he cannot reconcile with I. I have to humble, sup a soul of humility and go and say, brethren, youth, as your daddy, I was wrong. And here are ways that I can come together again. That community that I have been disrespectful toward, I own communities. That because someone don't have the whatever behind their name or don't have the optics within the value system, you believe that I can be disrespectful to the man sitting in the ashes. We have to go and humble ourselves and say, brethren, forgive I. It starts with I. One of our elders in the community, Baba Ras Marcus, says, if it is to be, it's up to me. but I'll assert further it's up to I and I within the Rastafari royal family to be aware of the increments that I and I can control in the reparation agenda, which is the family, the community, the sense of clarity in terms of cultural knowledge and African history. And remember, Africa is right now, them say it's 50-something states. But forget what happened before, after Berlin Conference. And think of Africa in terms of how His Majesty positioned it. In one of his speeches, right after the Second World War, he said that the Italians were seeking to destroy the Ethiopian race. The Ethiopian race. And in many of the language that is used across these history books prior to Berlin Conference, Ethiopia is viewed in terms of its racial structure and racial components. So we are a race of people. So forget the margins that they have put and the borders they have put around Africa and the parceling out of Africa, and think for ourselves as a singular unit with multiple social and ethnographical realities. But we also have something that is base, very base. It's the throne room of Ethiopia. Yes, it is the personage of Emperor Haile Selassie I and Empress Menenasra. And their black print is succinct towards I and I destiny, past, present, and future. That being said, if I and I can achieve those things, then I and I is ready for the reparation, the repatriation portion of the agenda, which is going forward into Africa, whether it is by what IDOR is currently doing, where we're doing deliberate intentional work at galvanizing a group of ones to build a community. And we're in the phases right now of land acquisition, having a team of ones going into Ghana to examine the proposed land grants that are there for us. And I'll happily say to our team who are here, Mama Waleti, I recognize our president, Brother Johnny, who is also on board. And I'm not sure if others are, but we got a report today from our beloved sister Felicia, Dr. Felicia from Washington, D.C., a Ghanaian sister who is doing some work for I. And she now has 5 communities that are now prepared to offer land, some at some prices, some at exuberant prices, low to high, but to offer us land and the welcoming mat to do what it is that I envision in creating an intentional community. But that intentional community cannot be like the Shashamane that I lived in and visited multiple times, 8 or 9 times over the past 16 years. I cannot be separated from the family that is on the ground. I have to develop the land, the skills to communicate, both with words and with deeds, and having a cultural understanding of the spaces that we're returning to, that we've been long separated from, 400 years or so. And I have to develop the humility that when we look at what people call regular folk, I don't be disrespectful and condescending to our people, but be willing to learn from the African spaces, because much is there to learn from. And whatever small we can share, we share with thanksgiving. So the reparation and repatriation agendas for I, in brief and to wrap up, are quite simple. It is repairing the breaches that I have access to, which are the personal, familial, community, etc. Make those changes so that I can become closely and most succinctly aligned
Get avocado here.
to the IRIT of His and Her Majesty. And in so doing, I will become what His Majesty decided and proclaimed that I must become. And I will become members of a new race, owing our ultimate allegiance, not to labels and boxes and spaces, but owing our allegiance to good people across our humanity. That is the message of IDOR. That is the work of IDOR, intentional work. that I seek to do daily, individually and collectively. And I pray that as a Rastafari family, as we're spread all across the space, and I will recall that mandate given to I by our Divine Majesty and obey those commands. Those few words and I give you thankful for, and welcome any words sown in terms of question, more broadly about what IDOR is doing with its repatriation agenda. But reparations, my beloved, forget the economic side. That is going to occur by Divine work and by those people most best suited for it. But I have personal responsibilities to ensure the repairing of the breaches in all our lives, our families and communities. Rastafari,
give thanks and praise to I Wayne for them beautiful words and instruction and guidance. Before I move, we have such a vast panelists, and I know that you all are well versed and have a lot of material to bring forward, but we working with time and it's of the essence. That being said, I will carry out a warning sign with the little hand that we have in the receptionist. I just place it, and that way I would signal to the panelists so that we could go wrapping it up. Without further ado, I will be presenting the next panelist, which will be Empress Maxine of Edmond EADUMC, born in Highgate, St. Mary, Jamaica, on March 13, 1958. Migrated to New York in the 70s. Music culture executive in the 70s also to present niece pioneer Clement Dove, Wither Sugar Minot. Bernard College from Columbia University, 1974 to 1976, political science major, Caribbean African focus. Entered the Rastafarian movement in 1976 in Brooklyn, New York. Jamaica, 1977, Ras Daniel Hertzman, art icon. Music industry, 1978 to Presses International Music Companies. Jamaica Panama Music Project launch, music style reggaeton. 1990, travel to Panama and Cuba. Refocus on Jamaica in 2003. Intellectual properties rights focus music brand in Jamaica 2003. Rastafarian intellectual property 2006. EADUMC RMC 2007 to present IP community social economic development, WIPO UNESCO, UN Human Rights Division. Bonnie Whalers, managed Bonnie Whaler, Rastafarian music cultural icon in 2010 to present. Kanja industry in 2014 to present VP Kanja Growers and Producers Association Rastafarian Kanja Global LTD in 2015. Campaign in Jamaica and South Africa bilateral in 2015. Without further ado, I leave you all with Empress Maxine. Wow. Wow.
Yes, so greetings everyone. I'm humbled also to be in the presence of, a lot of ones here that I've known, and probably collaborated with over the years. And we've gone through a lot of changes and experiences. And, it's good today, Emancipation Day, to be reflecting on the work done and the work to be done. I'm so glad that Ras Wayne Rose went first because, and I purposely asked for him to do so in order to give that exact broad range topic that, you know, for me, what I was specifically going to present on is a subject of the larger topic. So it's good that he framed the whole reparation and repatriation and, you know, the cultural inputs so that so that I could, you know, kind of move into what I identified specifically for myself. My topic was on the cannabis ganja industry and the intellectual property rights around the culture, which includes the music and includes ganja. And for me, my experience has been that I started politically. You know, I'm grounded in politics, not the politics, you know, running for office, but the politics of, you know, power and gaining freedom from, you know, the systems that I grew up in and, you know, was surrounding me. So we have to understand how the system works and how we can disengage or, you know, empower ourselves. So going to the, you know, intellectual property for me coming out of the music, you know, where I saw so much heritage created, so much, you know, value, but it remained, you know, it came from us, and it seemed to me to be almost a form of slavery in terms of, you know, you create, but you can't own what you create, and you can't determine the value, the direction, you know, of what you created. So as much as I was in the industry and taking part in it, it never, you know, it always was apparent to me that we did not own what we do not own what we're creating, because even with the power of our words, and I look at someone like Bob Marley, which comes back going on with our lives, and we think that we're free or doing it right, when we're actually playing into the system where to how we live our lives, whatever we create, we cannot transfer generationally. And the very system that we rail against, that we created art and value in opposition to, is then owned by that very system upon the completion of your work, or even the completion of your militancy, or the completion of your, you know, all this value that was created, because there's no structure around it, or because of how it was designed, you know, the structure not being around it is not something that you didn't want to do. It's the system that you're emerging out of, that your property, that what you create is owned, you know, that it forced me with all this value and all these people that seem to have something but don't have it, because if at the point of you creating it, you can't own it. Even if you created millions and millions of dollars, you can't actually own it. It made me have to think hard about the invisible rights, the invisible system, the invisible hands that are, you know, surrounding us and that are impacting us. Similar to what, again, what Ras Wayne Rule spoke about, that even as I deal with a lot of estates of artists or pioneers that have gone on, it comes back down to how did we live our lives? What was our relationship with our children? What was our relationship with the mothers, married, or, you know, in what I call or have experienced as a polygamy style thought pattern, but it's not linked to the culture of Africa, but linked to the culture slavery that, you know, again, Ras Wayne expounded on, and that I have to figure out within myself, because as an Afrocentric person, I wanted to attach that value, but then I realized, wow, I'm not really dealing with that. I'm dealing with a different type of multi, you know, relationship that's not grounded in that history of generational transfer. It's not, you know, it's just an outcome of being unhinged by the slavery system that we're still, you know, as Ras Wayne said, we still, I think as Rastafari too, we still have to look at it very, very, very deeply, because as was my experience, I came from an Afrocentric view in accepting a certain lifestyle, but then I realized going into it that it was not anchored in the larger Afrocentric value, but the one that, you know, has affected us with slavery. And it's very important to me, you know, what Ras Wayne was saying, because I'm actually, you know, in the wave of the generational, transgenerational wealth that should go down to families. And I see all of it, especially in the reggae music industry, being lost, you know, and going back to the system that we railed against. So that's my, why I began to focus on intellectual property rights, you know, from the music, trying to understand not just the rights that we see physically, but what are the invisible rights, the, you know, the intangible rights that the system knows how to manipulate and that we are not, you know, conscious of when we are doing and accomplishing or, you know, presenting things. So when we think we're protected and our values protected, it's not. And then it's easy to be co-opted and, you know, literally taken away. And leading that into the plant of cannabis, it was very interesting because of its relationship to the community, but also because I understood that this whole slavery, you know, transnational trade was also encouraged by another plant, which is called a sugarcane. So I began to see that the socioeconomic, you have to look at the socioeconomic relations behind the plant, behind the demand for the plant, and how those, you know, when they say, oh, legalize, what is it that they're legalizing? What I understood, you know, especially in Jamaica, where they said, oh, you have the Sacramento rights and this and that and all of that, that you had no rights because you had no economic rights, and you never had it because this plant was directly appropriated to destroy you. It was appropriated to imprison you. It was appropriated to, you know, do all these negatives about you. And so how could this legalization or sacrament or whatever they're, you know, talking about, how could this be enacted without us understanding or being in at the negotiating table to say, well, what is this right in law? What is it that you're giving us? You've just given us a word, you know, on a piece of paper, and, you know, without any even internal discussion in the community as to what our response is supposed to be, and how it's linked to the larger African descendant communities around the world.
Give thanks. We just lost the audio, so we will give Empress a minute. Empress Maxine, you mute your.
Okay, I
Your
see what
audio-
happened. A call was coming in and it because I'm on my iPhone.
Yes, yes,
It-
we're here. We're back. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you.
back. Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, I'm just throwing up the points of my interest and how it intersects both as a woman, a mother, a widow, you know, a partner, this value system of, intellectual property that I really was encouraged to come to the Rastafari community with, because we own so much in the reggae music industry, that I experienced and was also told by the international intellectual property associations that why aren't we extracting or benefiting from this value? And it's because we don't have proper understanding of our rights, and we have no structures to, create that basket for those rights, which was really my motivation around the formation of the council. Not the council in terms of our mansion council, but in terms of an NGO that would look specifically at those rights and convert them into economic gain through the development of a Rastafari trust fund mechanism, which was presented to us by the representatives from WIPO, that was being given to, sorry about that, the clock is coming in, that was being given to indigenous communities around the world, because we're in a phase, as talking about reparations is not just our reparations, is linked to the reparations of the earth. Whatever happened to us as a people, the earth was also affected by the same attitude, industrialization, etc. And it became clear that not only is our reparation evident because of what is happening to us as humanity, but it's also because it affected the earth. So it's no coincidence, as all of this was coming forward, that the reparation for the earth was being engaged at the same time that this ripening of the reparation for the African continent and the people, it's actually a duality. So I'll leave what I'm saying right there just as an introduction as to my interest and how I see it intersecting with a lot of layers. The whole idea, as Ras Wayne said, the repatriation is a multi-layered activity. It's not singular. And sometimes when we speak, it seems like, oh, it's this activity. If you're not in this activity, it's multiple layers. And we, as Ras Wayne said, we have to go for the layer that we have the competency in that will affect other layers. We may not have the competency in that layer, but our competency will affect how that, that negotiation occurs because of what we're specialized in, or what our unique focus and experience has been. So I wait to, commune with the, not just the rest of the group, not just on this call, but what we collectively, through our experiences, can share together to advance our individual projects, but also help to affect, other layers that are operating at the same time that we are. Right? Thank you.
Give thanks.
Give thanks, give thanks. We will move forward with so much information bottom of the screen, you all will see an area where it says chat. That way you all can continue formulating your questions, and you put the name attached to the panelists that you want to address this question to. And that way, at the end of the session, we will give a chance to each one of the panelists to at least answer 2 questions from the collective gathering as such. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce the next speaker. And this next speaker is named Empress Modestine I. Her bio is so extensive that I'm so elated to read it out. So I will go as slow as possible.
Oh,
so
you
we
don't.
can marinate every single word that I'm about to mention. Okay. First, we have Yvette Modestine. I know everyone knows her. She's a writer, a poet, an activist. She was born and raised in Colón, Republic of Panama. Ms. Modestine was named Ms. Modestine was named the 30th Afro-Latina you should know. She's founder and executive director of the Encuentro Diaspora Afro in Boston. Modestine has been profiled by Boston Globe as the uniter for her work in bringing the Latin American community and African American community together, and for the activism in building a voice for the Afro-Latino community. Ms. Modestine is the Diaspora coordinator of the Red de Mujeres Afro-Latinoamericanas, Afro-Caribeñas y de la Diaspora, an international network of Afro-descendant women. She is a board member of IBW, the Institute of Black Word. She is the co-founder of RCAA, ARAAC of the United States, the Regional Council of People of African Descent from the Latin America and the Caribbean. Ms. Modestine is also a NAARC, National African American Reparation Commission, Commissioner in June 2020. She's became an official member of Rastafari Alliance of Panama. Also in June 2020, Ms. Modestine was elected as the New England region leader on a national NCOBRA board. In 2019, Ms. Modestine received the inaugural Every Woman is an Activist award for marching forward in Massachusetts. In 2020, Ms. Modestine was named one of the women winning globally and internationally Woman of the Day in Afrocentric. In 2019, her poetry book, Nubian Butterfly, The Transformation of Soulful Heart, will be released in Panama. As an artist and a mental health clinical wellness facilitator, community organizer, educator, and IFA practitioner, Ms. Modestine speaks to the acknowledgement of the historical connection of people of African descent and the importance of seeing each other as we seek our collective liberation. Without further ado, because if I continue reading and reading, this is amazing. Well, without further ado, I leave you all with Empress Modestine. I know you all will enjoy it, so you all welcome her, and we here to listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rasankofa. Thank you so much. Greetings, all. Grand Rising on this Emancipation Day. Giving thanks to those whose shoulders I stand on, calling and leaning on my Caribbean and Jamaican ancestors, especially on this day. Yesterday, I shared a quote by the Emperor Haile Selassie where he says, an awareness of our past is essential to the establishment of our personality and our identity as Africans. As I commemorate and celebrate the global gatherings of Africans led by our great ancestor Marcus Messiah Garvey, let us ground ourselves in our beginnings and build a space for our people to be informed and our voices heard as we build an agenda for our African liberation. I am a child of deep Caribbean roots, born and raised in Colón, Panama. My proximity to the work of Marcus Garvey was deeply felt through the stories of my grandparents, specifically my maternal grandfather, who was from Manderville, and my grandmother was from Kingston. My grandmother, very fierce and fearless Jamaican woman, was one of the first of 3 women to own and run her own bus in Colón. I share this story to bring you closer to why this day and this gathering is a natural coming together of my development in deepening my African identity. I want to thank Rosella and the Rastafari Alliance of Panama for the welcoming to a space that completes me, and I look to learning more from the space and all of you. Also to Ross Ricardo, who was the first person as a young teen to answer my curiosity, and to the person that I saw ongoing, who I called Tio Rasnini, thank you, gracias. To Babatunde and Sankofa, I look forward to working closely with the both of you. Last week was the Earth Strong Day of Queen Mother Moore, who we call the Queen of Reparations. One of my favorite quotes by Queen Mother Moore is, "I don't pay those borders no mind at all." That is a guiding message as we build our reparations agenda. We are all concerned, I are all connected, and we have all been affected by the transatlantic slave trade and colonization. I always say to folks, I am an example of a Pan-African, born in Panama, of Caribbean descent, and raised in an American territory of Jim Crow imposed laws in another country. I learned from an early age how Blackness, Africanness is seen and rejected in all of these spaces. It is time for reparative justice. We built most of the spaces we still are fighting to be seen and heard in. As one of my mentors shared with me recently, the world is having the same 2 conversations, the pandemic and Black Lives Matter. And within both, all roads lead to reparations. Emperor Haile Selassie, in speaking on community development, said, the fundamental purpose of a community development movement is to teach the rural people of our empire that through cooperative self-help and a united approach to common problems, the vast potential for their own self-improvement, which they themselves represent, can be translated into effective programs which can do much to improve the standard of living. What does that look like to us? What would it look like for us as I build something together? I want to start with sharing the screen. Let's start. So, and this, I can give the link as we move forward. When we talk about reparations, one of NCOBRA's created 5 points that we feel that lead to then the 10 points that NAARC presented, NAARC, the National African American Reparations Commission. And as we talk about what should be the outcomes of reparations, we talk about cessation and guarantees of non-repetition. And as you see, part of that is dismantling entire criminal injustice system with its host of the 21st century. And this was written years back, and the fact that we are now in this conversation about defunding the police. And part of that also has to do with the release of all Black prisoners who fought against criminal and discrimination practices of the government. So this is one of the outcomes that we want when we talk about reparations and reparative justice, is that guarantee. The second outcome that we look for is restitution. So the right to repatriation and creation of African Knowledge Program, which both Ras Wayne and Empress Maxine both touched on, repairing the damages of the criminal injustice system, restitution of the stolen lands, strengthening Black America's information and communication infrastructure. And then another thing that we touched on, Empress Maxine touched on, is fund the programs that reincorporate Black men into productive. So how do we use our economy? How do we use our money? The third point that we look to as an outcome is compensation. Tax exempt status. What would that look like? Individual payments of inherited injury and theft of inheritance. That is part of one of the outcomes, but many of us feel that we really cannot put a number on what is owed to us. We sit here as Jamaicans and Panamanians, so there's the colonizers from the British perspective, the colonizers from the Spaniards perspective, and then we have the Americans in there. So how are they going to all come up with that number? But what we do know is that there is compensation to be had. Satisfaction, a formal apology, and an establishment of a Ma'afa African Holocaust Institution, and preserving Black sacred sites and monuments, and acknowledge right to self-determination. And the fifth outcome is the resources for health and wellness and healing and Black communities. And that's been one of the pieces that, as a community organizer, we saw the pandemic really highlighted in Boston, the disparities and the inequality that existed already in the system. So when we then are dealing with how the numbers are so centralized in our communities, it was no surprise that we needed to really have this conversation. I want to then move to another screen share. And this is the 10-point program of the National African American Reparations Commission. So the bigger platform of reparations, as we talk about it, and what we are looking for, the outcomes being those 5 points, but the 10 points are the reasons why those outcomes exist. And number one is a formal apology and establishment of the Ma'afa African Holocaust Institute. We demand a formal apology for the role of the United States government played by explicitly and implicitly participating in and encouraging and sanctioning the European slave trade and institution of chattel slavery. The apology should be initiated by the president and ratified by the US Congress by a roll call vote. The way 45 is behaving, although HR 40 is moving, it'll be interesting to see where we land with him. Number two, the right for repatriation and creation of an African Knowledge Program, which I already mentioned as part of the outcomes. The right to land for social and economic development. After centuries of free labor that fueled the commercial and industrial revolutions in the US, enriched those at the helm of capital and finance, and created opportunities and a sense of privilege for Europeans of every social economic strata. Enslaved Africans were emancipated without being granted a material stake in the form of land or resources, i.e. 40 acres and a mule to start anew in the hostile land. Number four, funds for cooperative enterprises and socially responsible entrepreneurial development. So how do we create our own businesses so that we have our own money and keep that money within our communities. An example of that we saw was the Black Wall Street in Tulsa and towns in like Rosewood, where white terrorist attacks took those systems down. Number 5, resources for health, wellness, and healing of Black families and communities. You know, as a clinician and a community organizer, you know, in the midst of the pandemic, we had care packages for our families. We created food pantries. We gave food gift cards. But in the midst of that, what was striking was that the mental health, the emotional strain of the pandemic, and then the Black Lives Matter, the visual of the killing of George Floyd, really already on top of the what we already call post-traumatic slavery disorder, our community was really fragile. So we've had like wellness gathering, and it's been really striking to see elders, all generations, take the time to join these wellness gatherings so that they can heal and build. And you know, the one we had this week was around radical hope, and how do we stay hopeful in these times. Number 6, education and community development and empowerment. And as you see here, the picture of Sir Hilary Beckles, who is the head of the CARICOM Commission, who we work very closely with. Number 7, affordable housing for healthy Black communities and wealth generation. This morning, we had our first virtual People's Housing Assembly here in Boston, and we had 100 people come together in Zoom because Boston is the 3rd most expensive place to live in the country. We're only $100 behind New York for the rent, and we're seeing already a very high number of folks who are fighting eviction. So we're now in the process of extended moratorium to protect the people in our community from getting evicted. Number 8, strengthening Black Americans' information and communication infrastructure. So let us tell our story and not wait for anyone else to tell our story. Preserving Black sacred sites and monuments is another piece. I remember Sir Hilary Beckles speaking about they had found that on the land where the University of West Indies is on, that they found the remains of ancestors, and they made it a sacred spot on the campus. So we need to find out where these spaces are so that we can honor and give thanks to that light in a proper way. And then number 10 is repairing the damages of the criminal justice system, as we are at over numbers in those who are serving time. So I want to close out because I really believe in being respectful of time so that we can have more I sharing time. So I want to close by saying this is beyond money. We need to disrupt and rebuild a system that places our well-being at the center. I want to thank you all for your dedication to our community and to our people. I will close with one of my favorite quotes from our ancestor, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, where he says, "The Black skin is not a badge of shame, but rather a glorious symbol of national greatness." So thank you very much for inviting me. I feel part of the family in more ways than one, and I look forward to us building and growing together. Thank you. Giving thanks.
Giving thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Without further ado, I'm going to bring the next panelist, Ras Aziz Khan Carroll is the son of Hubert and Sandra Carroll. Born in small town in the southeastern part of North Carolina, he has been married for 26 years to Channel Boy and has 4 children, Anna, Samuel, Enoch, and Samson. He studies geography, and earth science, specializing in natural resources management with an emphasis on hydrology and forestry. He currently serves as president of the North Carolina Rastafari Union. Without further ado, I leave you all in the company of Ras Aziz. Thank you very much.
Greetings, everyone. On this great Emancipation Day, I see members of the union. I see some faces of brethren and sistren that I met when I first came into Panama. Wala and Jasi, Helapaya. It's been some time. Yeah, when Sila first came down and asked I to speak on a particular topic on this forum here, I really didn't know where to come from. He said, yeah, well, just speak on some, product development, or actually community development. We at the North Carolina Rastafari Union, we were incorporated in 2011. We became an NGO in 2015, and during that time, we felt it necessary to attain land, because land is wealth. Land is your stronghold of community. If you have land and you're able to develop it, then you have, the essence of what we've been talking about here. It gives you a place to come together, to not only to come together, but it's a training ground for practical application in community development. The sister in Empress Modesai read an excerpt from a speech from His Majesty, and I was wanting to come from a similar speech on community development, which I think is apt in this time, and right along with the idea of reparations, and as Bridget Ras Wayne mentioned, reparations and repatriation, because I say that is to say, if we are to get these reparations, and when we do get them, or we are fortunate enough to return to the land of our forefathers, then the ability to develop a region where we land is essential. In a practical standpoint, we've talked about culture, we've talked about a few different things, but actually going in and developing the infrastructure that is required to maintain a sustainable community for 50, 100, 200 years is something that is honorable, to say the least, but it is something that we need to know. His Majesty states in community development, in the world today, community development is universally recognized as a process designed to create conditions of economic and social progress for the whole community, with active participation and largely upon the initiative of the community. Not anybody else, but the community itself. Accordingly, when people have the ability and means, their partnership with the government and development plan strengthens both the people and the government. It is therefore with this belief that we have undertaken extensive educational plans throughout the nation. Community development thus comprises two important elements. One, the participation of the people themselves in efforts to improve their level of living with as much reliance as possible on their own initiative. And two, the provision of technical and other related services in ways which encourage initiative, self-help, and mutual aid, and make these more effective. Self-help thus is the quintessence of community development programs. Self-help. And I like to bring out this all the time. When we're on the land, we're doing work, it's hard work, know-how, and patience. That was a formula that His Majesty put forward: hard work, know-how, and patience, right? So we started this program out on the land in 2015, and we started with 3 acres of land that was totally wooded, okay? From one end to the other had deciduous and evergreen trees that covered it. There was a running stream that went through it. And as some of the brethren online can testify just with their expression, going in and cleaning and clearing this land ourselves, learning how to use chainsaws, learning how to use backhoes, right? Chippers, things of that nature to begin the process of developing this piece of property. And we did that. We cut down the trees. We drove bulldozers and made roads through the property, all right? The roads itself needed drainage, so we made drainage in there, because within community development, and there's multiple layers of integration that has to go on to maintain the land itself, all right? And by being on the land and going through these steps ourselves, the practical application, the learning process, the growing, the fellowship, all that came along with us taking the mantle ourselves. And as Mashi said, we employed our own initiative to our community development. It requires, patience to implement a program, a community development program. It requires patience, especially if you're under if you're under similar circumstances as we were, which is the economic resources are not readily available as quick as our minds might be thinking of projects that we want to implement. Okay, so that has to be a part that is consistently in the air, so that you remind brethren and sisters that, hey, you remind them of the progress that we've made thus far, where we are and where we're going to go, and that, hey, sometimes it takes a little time. I like to refer to Aesop's fable, the Ethiopian Aesop, and the hare and the tortoise, right? The tortoise was slow, the hare was fast, but who won? You see what I'm saying? The tortoise. It requires patience, okay? And it requires some know-how. And that know-how comes with the actually going through the process of developing the land or a project, okay? Right now, we've got this land developed to the point of our water system is our stormwater system is intact. We've cleared the land. We have potable water on the land. We have built a tabernacle on the property. We're in the process of building sanitation services for members and the community, and housing is on the forefront. We're also have agricultural or gardening, let's say, small plot gardening that we've implemented. And so those are kind of like some of the, the practical applications that we've gone through and we've learned, and we put our hands on to put ourselves in a position to assist and to create models that can go from here to the continent or to other places within the United States that have communities that need, this land and community spirit, right? We have communities all over, but they're geographically placed in, one side of the city or the other side of the city. And if they were to come together and say, hey, let's get a piece of property where we can, direct our efforts, okay? There's a model that we're putting together here in North Carolina. I wanted to. I'm going to come back to one of our main ventures within the union, which is RALAC, Rastafari Ancient Living Arts and Culture. But I wanted to just highlight a couple points that I was asked recently to give my thoughts on what do I think a sustainable, development community would look like, or a program like that, if it was implemented. And, in order to implement a project like that, and not only do you need some of the experience and know-how, or as Garvey, would say, you at least need to know how to access the resources or the knowledge to be able to implement it. All right, you don't actually have to know it, but you need to know how to research and find that information so you can begin to implement it on a development project or development program. But outside of that, you also need to have some governance or some structure of governance within your community structure. Okay, you need a vision of how this community will operate, and what is the vision for, as I said earlier, 20, 50, or 100 years down the road. You need to be able to set goals and objectives, and also have an indicator of progress, some way to indicate the progress for reaching these goals and objectives. You need also, a guiding principle that you can use and come back to when implementing these goals and objectives. Additional, you need strategic planning sessions. You need to strategically plan, design, and prioritize your activities, okay? Be they, environmental, economic, or social activities. And then you have to choose and implement the activities that, based on the resources that you have at that moment, all right? And then chart and evaluate your progress as time goes on. Those are things that we at the North Carolina Rastafari Union, have implemented within our project development or community development program. And again, the topic is reparations and repatriation. So as, like the sister said, hey, the land that, the giving of land or the access of land, well, you have to be able to develop that land. You have to know how to work that land, okay? There's been too many instances where, I love, I admire Robert Mugabe, okay? And the efforts that he did to push out these white farmers. But there had to be a plan once that happened to be able to take over that land and make it functional so that, hey, the community there can live and be sustained, okay? We have to know these things so that when we receive this blessing, right, we're able to effectively manage it, all right? And Rosila wanted me to make sure I mentioned, and bring up, Rala, you know what I'm saying? Because it was a main galvanizing force of the community, I must say. I mean, our community had, I can't say it was a main galvanizing force, but in that time, okay? But in that time and place, Rallock was a galvanizing force. Rastafari ancient living arts and culture was something that was implemented to dispel the lies and shed light on the truth of Rastafari. It became almost, in the few years, the 5, 6, 7 years that we held Rallock in this area, became like a household Rastafari name, a name in the Rastafari household. But that particular venture, and I don't know if I've even said it in this space, we had attained this land in 2015, And Ralloc was something that we were implementing. It was a community function. It was a cultural enterprise, right? We would bring people together from all over the world and in one place specifically focused on Rastafari and Rastafari events. You know, most people say they ain't seen it, you know, because reggae right now, we all know what reggae has become, how it's become washed, okay? But what we had to come to the realization was that, okay, we have a tangible asset with this land, okay? And we need to decide that where are we going to focus our main energy on, okay? And we reassess things and begin to focus our energy on the land. And that's what we've been doing here lately. So I got the signal, and I want to give thanks for giving me the time, you know, and seeing. All right, let's live. Unmute yourself, Sankofa.
Yes, sir. Blessing, 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 much blessing. Oh, gosh. I'm here. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm here. I'm back. Oh, my goodness. That was profound. I believe that y'all guys are enjoying yourself. I know you are not falling asleep. It's hard to fall asleep with so much information. I want to share something with y'all guys before I bring the next speaker up, which will be the final panelist. And after that, we will go into some questions. We had a loaded question. And one thing I want to let you all know, guys, for those that are being the presenters of this platform, that the questions will be directed to all five. You all could raise your hand and answer as you choose to. If there is a question that is directed to a panelist in particular, I will mention your name, that the question is mentioned either to Ras Aziz, to Empress Modest, or and so forth. And keep on moving, either Empress Maxine and so forth, but it will be directed to any one of the five. I recollect back in the early 80s when I was wandering in the area of Southeast in Washington, D.C., and I was wandering in an area called, a street called Good Hope Road. And as I arrived to a corner, I saw this house. And something attracted me to the house, and I saw some children playing. You know how it is in neighborhoods that is called ghetto, which I call community because I know better. So as I approached the area, I placed my hand on a picket fence, but it was little woods that no longer had paint. Come to find out, that was the house of a great writer. This man was such a great writer. His name was, oh gosh, incredible. He let's see if someone can help me with his name, but he was in DC. He later went to England, and Marcus Garvey went to America seeking for him in the 20s.
Booker T. Washington.
No, it wasn't Booker T. Washington. He was a writer. His hair was very gray. It looked like he was like a straight Rasta, just that his hair was like a big afro. His name is Frederick Douglass. I know I couldn't paint a very good description of this man, but he's such a great man. But the humble thing to this is that our brother Marcus Messiah Garvey, our prince, in the 20s, he traveled to DC seeking for this man. just to find out that he already had passed. But it's such a thing to me, because in my new coming, you know, in my development, I was standing on the ground of a man that made such an impact. And it's very, very humbling to me to even mention his name and know that every word that come out of the mouth of every single one of y'all guys is because these brothers in their flight, in somehow, the reparation that we speaking of today is what they dream of. But I'm not going to continue with this. I'm going to bring the next speaker because he's going to do his thing, and I know y'all want to enjoy it. So without further ado, he wanted to be introduced as Jabi. In my humble and respect, Dr. Jabi has been heard weekly on radio stations such as WBAI 99.5 FM in New York as the host of Single Bible, a graduate from Clayton School of Natural Healing and Herbal Healing Academy. Jabi continues to be at the cutting edge of holistic medicine while maintaining the firm commitment to proving traditional alternatives. He is a pioneer in electric medicine who is credited with establishing the first IDOR vegan health food store in New York City, in the whole tri-state area, just to elaborate. Dr. Jabi has written numerous publications, including the Jamaican Glennar, the Star Abyssinian, the Star Abyssinian News, and Amsterdam News. His articles have also appeared in many New York daily lectures in many universities and penal institutions, community centers, religious institutions, and colleges around the world, etc. Other projects' significance include President of New York chapter of the Ethiopian Holocaust Remembrance Committee at Rus International, the company responsible for establishing the Ethiopian Holocaust Museum. Dr. B also was the CEO of Single Bible Herbal Companies and chairman of Darc Foundation Incorporated, an umbrella Rastafari civic organization whose current activities include building and cooperating and cooperative that could lead to a substantial unity within our community. And without further ado, I leave you all with Dr. Jabi. We are having some problem with this audio.
Is that any better?
Yes, yes. Greetings.
We're going wheel and come again. Tenaciously.
Yes.
Without any delay, we want to first say thanks to each and everyone here as we commemorate another anniversary of one of the most important days in the history of man. Why is this day so significant? You see, liberation is the #1 component for health. And because I was instructed to speak about health, how can I not speak about the importance of liberation? Having said that though, I must state the fact that on this day, 100 years ago, that the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey introduced the red, black, and green for the very first time. So today is the centennial anniversary of the introduction to the world of the red, black, and green. Health. It was 98 years ago today, in the year 1922, that Kidamawi, Haile Selassie, then Rastafari Makonnen, gave to the African/Ethiopian peoples of the world his first land grant. 1922, 98 years ago. Our Majesty, recognizing the significance of the Ethiopian people and pointing out that we are one and the same as the Ethiopians on continental Africa, commissioned us to come home. 1922. How many of us is familiar with these facts? A nation without the knowledge of its past is like a tree without roots. We must be conscious of that fact, because the greatest health of all is mental health. Mental health is a problem that has affected the Rastafari community beyond proportion. You know, men and people often say they're mad. However, the utterance of men and people is not what I'm talking about at all. Imagine, Kidamawi Haile Selassie gave us land again and again. 3 distinct instances where gifts of lands were given by the Emperor of Ethiopia to the peoples of the world that are Black. Remember, if you're not Black, it wasn't for you. No disrespect to your pigment, because, you know, you oftentimes you don't have any control over the pigment that you gain. Nevertheless, because of the atrocities that were committed that contribute to our demise of ill health, our Majesty, in his quest to take us back home, which the Rastafari nation always speak of what? Repatriation. And it is our Divine Majesty who, in his infinite wisdom, presented that platform on which we could repatriate. And the irony about it, His Majesty did not look at us as Africans at all. He viewed us as Ethiopians at home and abroad. We understand very well that, you know, in today's world, we are African in essence. Nevertheless, that vesture of Ethiopian reality must not pass us by. So we come in full circle for help. One of the most significant contributions that His Majesty gave to us, He implored us to organize and centralize. How can we be a healthy nation lest we organize and centralize? When you look at a stone or a rock, is it the rock the organizing of a variety of sands? These sands come together and was able to form rocks that could build pyramids, monuments that remain visible today after thousands of, as a matter of fact, most people can't even count the amount of thousands of years. Nevertheless, the example of that rock tells us unequivocally how important it is for unity. Thus, His Majesty says, and Rasila often echoes, that if unity is the accepted goal. However, we pia sometime when it comes to the united effort. So I must again say thank you for those who have gathered here today, and to the organizers, and yes, to the ancestors that built the Panama Canal, and those who died in the process of building. We say homage to the martyrs. We say tribute to the martyrs. We say, without you, you would have not existed, much less to be here today. A nation that does not provide his or her own food is tantamount to remain in slavery forever and ever. That is why it is imperative that this great Rastafari nation start to feed ourselves. To feed ourselves. The foods that we're eating today is oftentimes laced with a host of chemicals and negative energy. How can we then nourish ourselves in the most proper way? We have to, we must. So I must once again give thanks to the Rastafari Union of North Carolina, i.e. the North Carolina Rastafari Union, for taking that initiative to establish for us things that we need to do and should have been doing throughout the years. We know Skellion and time is of the essence. So what we have here to give, the greatest thing is to give. The Darc Foundation present to the great Rastafari nation today a treaty of unification, harmony, oneness, and love that will be disseminated to all of the houses and mansions within this particular discourse, to be signed, to be looked into, to be viewed, so that once and for all, I will not see on these tabloids called social media the garbage and the harm's house that has been spewed against each other within this great Rastafari nation. It must end, beginning with the signature. Now, if you're not signing it, you have a fine, and we're going to make the people them know, say you're never ready. Because when it was put forth, you was found wanting. So, the Darc Foundation will present this treaty, which has already been drafted by myself and a team of attorneys, to be presented to the nation so we can start moving forth and forward in the manner that will make our ancestors please, will make Kidamawi Selassie please, and to make each and every one of us please. So no more sepulchral tones, please. Let us look to the future calmly, confidently, and courageously, and we'll guide you into health as we proceed. Love unlimited. Kirina Salam. Rastafari forever.
Rastafari. Blessing. Thanks and blessing. Thanks and blessing. Jabi. Very profound, very profound. As we gather our thoughts, we want to show an appreciation to all the panelists, for their presentation. Just show our appreciation. Y'all could raise your hand, touch the little knob, because this was great. This was excellent. We want to open the mics now. I'm going to read a couple questions that was asked by panelists and by some listeners. And this question is going to be overall, and you all feel free within inside of the exposees to answer. You all can raise your hand. I will just go ahead and open your mic so that you can answer the question of the panelists. We will have a brief 5 minutes taking these questions so we can move forward and wrap up this session. The first panelist, the first question is, in the wake of declining population, some countries have given property to investors for $1. And COVID primarily in the European community, do you believe there is a role to utilize eminent domain to serve as a springboard for governments around the world to commence an honest movement forward reparation. Does any one of the panelists would like to take this question, or you would like me to read once again what was said by one of our listeners, or what was wrote by one of our listeners? Our panelists, I don't see no hands. Does anyone want to answer this question? Yes, yes, Ras Aziz. Thank you.
I can give my opinion on it.
Sure.
I don't, if I heard the question right, I don't personally think that eminent domain is the way to go to acquire land in Africa, right? It should be a process that is more of a free will offering that has been done through coming together on common ground and educating each other on the realization of what has taken place over these hundreds of years and what has brought people, you know, Africans from Africa to these foreign lands, and the reason why we want to return and we, you know, deserve to return, but definitely not eminent domain, because to me that is going to stir up enmity between those Africans who never left the continent and those who are coming back. Give thanks. Isis.
Irie. Thanks and give thanks. Move along, we have another question. This comes from one of our sisters. I'm very, very happy to see how the movement of our empresses around the world have been impacted, and they are doing they strength. And the question goes: Black local mayors and leaders have spearheaded the use of government authority and purchasing power to impose equity in the United States. For example, in Washington, D.C., Mayor Marion Barry refused to invest any city funds in companies doing business in USA. Many other Black mayors invoke this same authority. Do you think there is an opportunity to use such similar measures and social media to collectively force the global community to truthfully address reparation? Does anybody would like to target this panelist? These panelists are, we all have actually bring out the best of the best of people around the world. So now we're here facing questions that are vital to our flyer. That including, if I may say, Panama building a Fort Bridge, considering that our Panama Canal is fully operational in the midst of COVID, while the world stands still and all kinds of travelers, unless given authorization as a human rights division so that they could go and make the repatriation towards the citizen. So now we are here, and at the end of this roll call, we will address where we go from here, because we are not a group of intellectual that we just leave, you know, substance on the table and don't plan ahead. So I would just give a small little recap of the question, where the panelists say to collectively force the global unity to truthfully address reparation.
If I may offer an opinion, an informed opinion.
Sure.
So the dynamic that I is within, a Western dynamic, there are many lessons in the history of the West, and as relate to how the West deals with the question of Africans in the West. And as early as the quote-unquote Declaration of Emancipation debate in the Americas, there was a clear resistance, even from the man who is credited with signing the Emancipation Declaration, Lincoln. There was a clear discussion about not wanting to have the African presence here. In fact, in his own words, he said we would be a scar on the conscience of white America. So, in asking a question about whether or not the current energies will force a conscience, a new conscience on white America, the jury, I believe, is still very much out and perhaps leaning against a positive response to that. However, what becomes essential, I believe, is the work that I can do incrementally to allow for the respectability that is befitting of humanity, and especially as Rastafari, people who, within the context of organization, IDOR, our mission is to position Rastafari as the head of the African and human family. And the more I embrace that, Ras meaning head or leader, Tafari, I want to be respected, embracing the name and living that reality, I believe there is value, added value that comes with that, even within the Western political space. But I need to ensure that we're living that value, representing it, not just in terms of the principles of how we live, but how I organize economic resources. Saying that then, very recently, IDOR has been participating with a group of Africans and African-minded people in a global initiative called Black Economy Excellence, formulated within a structure called a Global Program Management Services. And it's an initiative that is seeking to bring Black dollars together within one space to enfranchise Black economic development and to create Black wealth. And Rastafari have been speaking about this for decades upon decades, and it's always an asterisk or an afterthought in our conversations, because even we're very passionate about speaking about these things, where we've always been left clueless is how to implement it. Once people like, entrepreneurs like Jabi, Brother Johnny, among many others, have models of success that have created personal enfranchisement, and these are very generous brothers and the sisters who do business also, they share with the communities. However,
yes,
to take that example and to multiply it out to impact the millions upon millions upon millions of Black people that we have, we need a more deliberate, structured strategy. And what I've seen happening in my engagements with this entity, the Black Economy Excellence Enterprise, it's just a beautiful, beautiful energy. If you will allow I, because I can share just a very brief, because they're talking about how we own the Black narrative also. How do we own our own narrative? And I heard Sister Modesta spoke of that narrative that is ours. But again, when it is said, and then we move away from it, because it's, we're declaring intention. Give thanks, my brother.
Yes, give thanks.
Yes, sir. We're declaring, so let me see. We're declaring intentions, but we don't have a plan. B is a plan. And I think if we are introduced to it and we're able to digest it and have clarity on it, ask the right questions, then it is something that can take us as a vehicle towards economic empowerment. That being said, I have the video. I can share it within a link within the chat, and one can sip upon it. Yes? Give thanks.
Give thanks, Ras Wayne. I have the next question goes directly to Empress Modestine. One of the panelists says, how do Rastafarian NGOs engage the Reparation Commission to present projects such as agriculture, solid waste management, and the reassurance of the Black Star Line, etc.?
That's a wonderful question, and I think, you know, in being a member of the commission and sharing that I am in this space with all of you today, I think we are starting that conversation. So I think now it's up to us that this space is established, is to try to set up a meeting with the commission, the NAARC Commission, and I also think we should try to set up a meeting with the CARICOM Commission, and place ourselves in a conversation with these both spaces, because although the Rastafari community is placed in the CARICOM Commission, the folks out of Martinique, the folks out of Trinidad are very strong, but I still think we need to put a stronger voice that's centered in an African root of mindset and a narrative that doesn't get diluted by a still somewhat of a colonized perspective that I think both commissions struggle with at times. So the approach is, how do we approach to ground and almost challenge the narrative that exists in these two spaces for them to expand and see the importance of the Rastafari I community's language and process. So I see myself as I give myself to the space as a possible go-between to get that conversation going between us and two commission spaces.
Give thanks, give thanks. Give thanks. Very, very profound, very good answer. I'm gonna read two more of these questions. These questions are loaded. Y'all feel free as panelists to answer these questions. This question go openly. How do we practically combine the reparation and repatriation effort and the context which those in the diaspora? How do we practically combine reparation and repatriation together? Anyone would like, Dr. Jabi, yes, Ras, blessing.
Now, in order for us to really approach, what I am hearing oftentimes is that we are binary in our approach. It doesn't seem that we can do bomb and right at the same time. You see, the mines that we own in Africa belongs to the Africans. Whether it's a diamond mine or a gold mine or platinum or whatever mine you want to call it, it belongs to us. What I'm seeing is that because of some of the behaviors of our governments on continental Africa and the deals that is made behind the scene with Bakra Massa, these mines have not been turned over to the Africans. If today all of the African nation decides once and for all that they're going to maintain and secure the resources that belongs to Africa, then we don't need a dime in reparation from no one. Because we have everything to begin that repairing. And because we look at reparation as a mode of repairing, one cannot demand from a wicked things to give unto I that rightfully belong to I. If it's a volunteer situation where that wicked recognize that the atrocities was wrong and willingly give, that's a complete different. In other words, I cannot demand apologies. apologies should be granted willingly. And what I'm hearing for the most part is that we are trying to extract apologies. What we need is to get that which rightfully belongs to us. What is so difficult for all the nations in Africa, call themselves Africa Union, Norway, UA, what have you, the great Rastafari nation, irrespective of our denomination, to once and for all stand up and be counted so that our resources can be given to us. So what I'm hearing again is this, that, you know, in order for me to repatriate, someone is gonna dig some diamond out of my mind and give me something that they call reparation from my money. So isn't that robbing Peter to pay Paul? Another example of Saul, give thanks to love and like.
I hear. Thanks and greetings. Okay, I have the last panelist question.
Could I make a point?
Yes, sure.
Yes, I just wanted to interject that as Dr. Jabi says about the binary approach, and when someone had spoken about I think President Lincoln and their attitudes towards African repatriation, as you know, in the time of Marcus Garvey, he actually had colleagues in the US Congress who also wanted to repatriate Africans, meaning there was a set of congressmen or whoever who had the same mindset that, you know, they want to repatriate Africans, right? And that was the whole concept of Liberia and Sierra Leone and, you know, all of this. So, but the idea that the West or the people who would be given reparations need the labor, you know, it wasn't a thing like, okay, in Emancipation, we realized that we no longer need your labor, so you can return home. This continuous need for the labor relations, why you were here in the first place. You weren't brought here because of race or racism. You were here because you could, you know, deal with the heat and, you know, the environment to grow their sugarcane, right?
Sure.
So, and then your labor becomes necessary for their industrialization and their economies. So to think that a negotiation is going to go on where they are gonna shut down their economic, you know, model,
okay,
you know, to allow you to be free, you know, almost like Moses and, you know, that whole Pharaoh Moses story, let my people go and whatever. My understanding that we need to understand is what is the, you know, like me being in Jamaica here in America and seeing that Jamaica is a migrating economy. There are more Jamaicans that leave Jamaica to satisfy the labor market of, you know, Europe, England, Canada. And so the Jamaican that says, oh, I want to go to Africa is not allowed to go to Africa because it doesn't fit in the model of the economic system. But you can go anywhere else in the world to go and build their economies, but you can't go home. So I'm just inserting that the labor relations, you know, we have to study in this whole, because I think reparations is coming because the colonial economic system is itself, you know, like with the COVID or with the environment, whatever they represent to the earth, as much as us, it's like it's not just, oh, this is a reparation for the African people. This is a reparation for the earth. They have, in moving or dealing with the African people, the African resources, and in this unbalanced manner, the karmic energy of the earth has gone lopsided. And so the concept of reparations now is not simply for us. And so when we are asking for it, we need to understand the larger economic and environmental and, you know, consciousness that we're in. Right?
Yes.
That's just my thought.
Okay. Dr. Jabi, I'll give you a chance after I pose this last question that comes from Ras Salif, a young doctor from North Carolina. And he says in his text, there are few Afrocentric mental health organizations. One such organization is Progressive Life Center, PLC, founded in Washington, D.C. The PLC, under the late Dr. Federica Phillips, created the NTU principle, is a pluralistic approach towards delivering therapeutic services and psychoeducational program that is framed in an Afrocentric understanding of the word. What role do you think organizations such as PLC play, and how do you think we can access them? If anybody can answer me this question, and we are speaking on a platform that is full of young brothers that are eager to know these things because they are essential to our flight in the world as today we live in it.
You see, if I may.
Yes, Rasby.
Yes, in response to the question and a lead up to the response to that question is knowledge of self. The American Medical Association and the World Health Organization is not there to assist African peoples at all. In fact, they were established specifically to destroy the African mind, body, and soul. So the brother is absolutely correct that sent out the question. If that organization is Africans for the greater good of Africans, that is where the situation stands. Now, I would again be playing games if I did not point out that the American Colonization Society was responsible for the establishment of Liberia and Sierra Leone. Again, the American Colonization Society, which simply means the quest was to use these places as colonies. But the pawn in the game was us, in essence, colonizing each other. And that's the chickenry that exists. So once again, in order for us to really bring about optimum health, homeostasis health, so to speak, we have to be the doctors. We have to be the nurses that is responsible for each other. When we leave that responsibility to other nations and other people, even when they have their best interests at heart. You see, our RNA and our DNA, it is completely different than what the pharmaceutical is providing for us. You know, a Rasta need nutraceutical, not pharmaceutical. I rest.
Okay, Ras, blessing. This being the last question, I want to go into the final two chapters of our reunion. I'm going to at this moment call on the ARP President-elect, Ras Babatunde.
Yes, I will give thanks. Give thanks to give thanks to all the panelists. It's a joyful, a very, it's a nutritionist of African development. And I give thanks because all this is for a purpose, our purpose. And given a resolution and a plan of action for this session, we should uphold another session for looking forward in which are the projects and which are the manifestations that we can uphold for our communities as in each country and also internationally. So we can reach out to several more communities of Rastafari and African people, Afrocentric people, to advance our culture and our own specs on this time of our life. So I'm gonna leave you with the moderator that will give us the last updates on this session. It was pretty grateful. We're gonna be having informing everybody, the panelists, and also we're going to have, if you can give us in the chat room your emails so we can share this session and have a continuation for the next one and be advised of it. Thank you very much to one and all. Rastafari. Give
God
thanks and
bless.
kofar.
Okay, on August 17, there's a libation of Earth Strong for Marcos Mosiah Garvey, our prince. This is one of our announcements. Most of the time, we create a panel where we go from here. Where do we go from here? Well, I want to do in closing, because we all share the information for I. I want to enclose says that I believe that every single one of us, our name have meaning and our name have power. We bear those names because someone had it before us, one of our kind, one of our own, you know, either that be a prince or that be a queen, that be an empress or that be royalty. I feel very proud, and I honestly can say, to be elected and supported and be appointed by Ras Sila to address such a lofty panel. Every single one of your words today have inspired me, and if I've inspired a lot of young brothers and young sisters that someday tomorrow would like to lead just in your same footstep. And we should not, we should not, and we will not take for granted the moment that you all have shared with us. I don't take for granted not one single minute. You know, we are human and we are developing. Now we are professional and we are striving. We are striving for a better day. We are striving for a better tomorrow. And as the flyer was put together, Ras Sila, he was very relentless, because this brother, he is not just a mentor, he has become an uncle. I mean, you can call the whole family tree. I will not stop talking about him, but we are sharing a very special bond, and I thank him. You know, at times I have the phone, and I think I have 3 phones in my hand, because he's on one line and he's on another one. I say, "Oh, you did that? How is that possible?" But I tell you, Jah Almighty is great. And I am so not lost for word, but you know how we do as the root of our blood and of our ancestors. We are very emotional. So with that being said, you have to give due where due is due. And to each and every one of you all, I say thank you. Thank you in name of the Alianza Rastafarian Panameña de Panamá. Muchas gracias en español. Thank you very much in inglés. Assalamu alaikum, Allah y todo lo demás. Muchas gracias. And you all give thanks and be blessed in the rest of your evening. And see you all in the next panel. And remember, Marcos Mosiah Garvey, beautiful prince of all. Thank you very much. Peace and love.
Rastafari.
No respect.
Blessed love to one and I give thanks.
Blessing.
Blessings.
Guys, give thanks to us.
Yes, I remember that you can share us the email in the chat room so we can save your address and link up for the next one. Give thanks. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you, Dr. B. Thank you, Empress Modest I. Thank you, Empress Maxine, for all the love. Thank you, Ras Wayne. Thank you to Ras Aziz. Thank you to everyone that has been here, including the panelists that have shared us this precious information. And as we said, we're gonna looking forward to continuing improvement in the ways of how we work and what we can work to work together and look forward for this emancipation, a full emancipation and repatriation of ourselves.
Hello.
Give thanks once again.
Here.
Rasila, give thanks.
Yes. Before we close session, I want to just say something real quickly. First of all, I want to give thanks for the excellent work that you and the moderator, I and the moderator displayed. Today was real professional. Give thanks for that. And I give thanks to all the panelists that I know very well, and I know they would have done an excellent job as one recognized participated in this forum. But I want to be able to share the panelists' information with the Alianza Rastafari of Panama, the direct contact, because this is not open. We now have to move progressively to deal with the issues of reparation and repatriation on a proactive level. So if once the panelists will allow I to share the information, your contact WhatsApp with the Rastafari Alliance of Panama executive, I'll wait for the item to give me the okay, the blessing. Come on, give thanks and give thanks for the work.
Yes.
Much work to be done.
Give thanks to one another, you know, Rastafari.
For the panelists.
Guide them.
Everybody's still around, Babatune. I don't know what you will do.
Powerful conversation, Babatune. Powerful conversation.
People don't want to sign off. Oh, boy,
appreciate
oh,
the powerful conversation, you know. Give
Yeah,
thanks.
I'd like to make one
Mr.
suggestion.
Maxine, blessed love.
Yes,
One of the things that I was looking at, because of the Black Lives Matter movement that has emerged with this pandemic and, you know, converging with the raising of the consciousness, there was a lot of funding that seemed to be wanting to be targeting, especially in America, and maybe some, you know, there's like a trending in relation to people not necessarily understanding the overall mechanics of reparations, but they want to be involved. I mean, not, you know, the specific as we saw it, the colonial governments or whatever, but it seems like ordinary people, the consciousness that is touching, you know, humanity. And so, you know, that was why I was intrigued about, you know, the effort to identify the Rastafari organizations that are registered and positioned in certain communities, you know, across the board where there's a high response or a high conversation going on, so that we can, you know, which I approve of Dr. Jabi's treaty. I'd love to see it, to see how, you know, it not just deals with what, you know, the negatives, but directs us, you know, within our spaces to be conscious of what's happening, because we don't know how this thing is exactly going to happen. And I have a sense that it's happening on such a large, you know, human scale, that where we may be talking about governments, it may actually be people, you know, large masses of people who may, you know, be the contributing factor to, you know, get a lot going. So I'm just encouraging the essence of the coming together, you know, trying to bring the organizations in their individuality and in their progress. I think of marches when there is a band, there's always a musical spearhead to what comes, you know, behind, like the army, but there's always a spearhead. And I, you know, I really do feel that as Rastafari, we have been that spearhead to, you know, lead this march. And now that we are, you know, getting to our point, we have to, you know, move from being just a champion to be a delivery system, which is why I also was impressed by Ras Wayne Rowe's Black Economic Excellence platform. I'll definitely look into that. It reminds me of the Black Economic Enterprise platform that I heard of out of South Africa, trying to, you know, engage the Black populations there to, you know, in the change up from apartheid.
Very,
so,
very well.
Yes. So I'm just
running out of time. Sorry.
Yes, I'm just acknowledging that
Empress.
what we have to do for August 17th.
Yes, 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 indeed. Oh, guys, you know, that's what we call thirsty. We are very thirsty for that knowledge. We are thirsty to receive all this powerful
and connect the dots.
Yes, but you know, one of the most beautiful things that we walking away today is that we all share the same contacts. We know each other now, and we are embracing the new bridge. We are just building a new bridge with old agendas. We are strengthening it. So everything that you just spoke of was very profound. And we have these things in note, which Ras Babatunde will make sure that every single one receive the link so we can recap every single thing that occurred today. You remember that an initial of the it was said that it will be recorded. So we are wait, because we got minutes of this. We will be dissecting it so that we can put forward, you know, through our different organizations. And Rastafarian definitely comes from a long walk of struggle. And we are no longer in that walk of struggle. We are in that walk of fight and liberation, because this is where we are now. So with this, now
close with a prayer.
Thank you.
Close with a prayer.
Yes.
Close with a prayer.
Yes, before we close with the prayer, I have Ras Aziz, straight up from Capitulo de Colón, that I want to give some words too. Give thanks, Honorable Aziz.
Okay, we also will bestow Ras Aziz with this same moment so that he can lead us in that prayer, and that way we can be signed off in the good spirit. Thank you, Ras Aziz. Welcome.
Blessing in the name of Jah Rastafari. Before we go into giving thanks at this such high level reasoning, I would like to just include, being that we have such a honorable panel there, to include in reputation, include identity, because we are practically 65%, but a small percentage of that 65 know their identity, and they believe when you say African, it's just because of the color of your skin or because you wear dreadlock. So I feel into this reputation and recuperation, we must, is a must, include identity. When our brothers and sisters understand their identity, where they came from, where they are now, where we going, I feel the movement will be more powerful. Say that also, I would like to quote from our emperor, anyone who makes the wrong choice will be a burden, not only to himself, but to future generations. With that, I give thanks in the name of Jah Rastafari Selassie the First for this and all thy blessings, who live and reign forever and ever. Jah Rastafari.
More powers. Give thanks, family. We see you soon in few weeks. So let's honoring our ancestors. Today we keep the heart of celebration, no, emancipation, and also our Panamanian or our ancestors that work here in the Panama Canal. So we give thanks every time to all who join us. We hope you join us in the next one. Feel free to write us. I'm gonna leave our email in the chat room, so you can either send us a message and we can add you to the distribution list, so we can keep the networking and updating you about upcoming events. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Sankofa, more powers. Give thanks to one another.
Aye.
Yes, nice.